Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends. We open up tonight on this 15 April 2014 with news out of the Ukraine on the crisis there. The first story tonight, a Russian Lada chases a tank in the Ukraine. Now, I believe there is audio that will be going along with this in just a moment. Oh, there are visuals to watch, and here's some background sound with it. This footage was posted online, friends, and it purports to show pro-Russian activists in a Lada confronting a Ukrainian tank. The car's occupants pursue the tank across a field, apparently in the Donetsk town of Sloviansk, and instruct its driver to turn off the engine. Eventually, the tank driver shakes the hand of one of the crowd and switches the engine off. However, an argument ensues with the Russian speakers demanding to know the tank driver's mission. The video, which cannot be independently verified, was uploaded a couple of days ago on the 14th of April. And we have more video for you, news report on the crisis in Ukraine right after this. I think we've seen the bulk of that one, so I'm going to come on out. And we've got a little bit more on the Ukraine crisis. This next video from today's news, in fact, just a few minutes before we went on the air, this story was released on the military column that was seized in the Kramatorsk area of the Ukraine.
Since first light, armoured vehicles loyal to the government in Kiev have been manoeuvring through eastern Ukraine. But time and again they were foiled by rebellious villagers. These vehicles, trying to get to the local airfield, were stopped by people who were upset by what had been branded an anti-terrorism operation. Do I look like a terrorist? This man said. I've just been planting onions. The villagers were buzzed by attack helicopters and even fighter jets, but in the end the soldiers had to give up. And so, blockaded by the villagers, the armoured personnel carriers are having to turn around and find another way through what is becoming increasingly hostile territory. In some places there were scuffles and even the occasional gunshot, but it was largely peaceful. These soldiers found themselves blocked in and were forced to surrender. Their vehicles, now under a Russian flag, were driven in triumph to the anti-government stronghold of Sloviansk. The captured armoured personnel carriers are now on display here as trophies in the very centre of Sloviansk, the most rebellious town in eastern Ukraine. Round the corner we found one of the captors who described the surrender.
It was peaceful, without any shooting. Now they are having some food and a wash because they were hungry and dirty.
Just 20 yards away in the park, we found Yulia playing with her son Matvey, who illustrates the problem the new Kiev government has establishing authority here. After weeks of being bombarded by Russian propaganda, many people fear their own troops.
I'm worried about the helicopters and planes flying overhead. I'm worried that the Kiev government sent them against peaceful citizens.
As government troops reinforced their airfield, NATO said it was strengthening its forces in Eastern Europe, while the Ukrainian Prime Minister claimed Russia was erecting a new Berlin Wall. Tomorrow's talks in Geneva take place with relations between Russia and the West at their worst since the end of the Cold War. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, Kramatorsk.
Thank you, Daniel. Friends, we're keeping an eye on what's happening in Europe because of the next major event in prophecy that's illustrated on this chart under column number 5, which Revelation 6 depicts under the 5th seal as the Great Tribulation, and a time when the beast power that is in prophecy will have come into vogue. That'll be the crowning of an emperor out of Frankfurt, Germany, who will revive the old Holy Roman Empire. It will be the beginning of World War III. It'll be the time of a great martyrdom of saints. It'll be the time of Jacob's trouble, a time that Jesus Christ described as a time that's so bad no time before it has ever been as bad, and no time after it, thankfully, will ever again be as bad. And it'll be a time when the 2 seals that precede the 5th seal, the 3rd seal of the black horse of famine, the 4th seal of the pale horse and its rider named Death, alongside whom Hades, hell, the grave rides, the pale horse of pestilence, plagues, earthquakes, seismic activity of all kinds, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis in various places, wildfires, floods, etc., and trouble, terike, just Jesus Christ described it as just trouble. Troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, and mobs and seditions, but not the big trouble of the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation. But these 2 seals, one of them, the 3rd seal, is going to take 1/3 of the lives of the whole earth in famine. The 4th seal is prophesied to take 1/3 of the people of the earth in pestilence and plagues and death. 1/3 of the people will die by pestilence, 1/3 by famine. Another third during the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, will be taken captive and die in captivity, and then a small percentage, about 10% or so, will remain alive to the time when we see the 6th seal and the 7th seal and Jesus Christ return. Let me just open up this seal a little bit wider. Do we have that on this button over here? Well, nope. Let me come on out of that, because that's our countdown for the opening. Well, that slide got moved. I'll put it up for us another evening that shows the 7th seal up to the time of Jesus Christ's return. But I just wanted to mention those few things from the chart. We'll cover that again, perhaps even some tomorrow evening. In our next report, Spain. We're watching things that relate to Europe and the possible coming together of the European Union into a full federation, a full United States of Europe that gives its power to one major leader. And we'll explain why that may likely be a German leader, an Assyrian, when we get to a couple of stories later. But we're watching Europe and what's happening in Europe, and this story out of today's news involving the southernmost border of Europe with Spain, where Spain says it needs more help from the European Union to control one of Europe's most southern borders, because in recent weeks, hundreds of migrants, now they're concerned about it over there, and the United States government should perhaps take note of this story out of Spain. In recent weeks, hundreds of migrants from sub-Saharan Africa have scaled the border fence separating the Spanish territory from neighboring Morocco. Tom Burridge has this report.
We're in Melilla, which is a Spanish territory in North Africa, and we're heading towards the border with Morocco. We've hidden our medium-sized camera, and I'm filming now with one which fits in the palm of my hand. and I'll soon be putting it in my pocket. We're heading into Morocco without journalist permits because where we're going the authorities don't want us to film. So we've crossed the border now, we're in Morocco. We're within touching distance though with the border into Melilla. As you can see, we're going up a mountain. Gurugul, it's called. And we've come to see the people living here.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
So 11 of you live in here?
Yeah, 11 of us living here.
These makeshift homes stretch all over this part of the mountainside, and this is just one camp of several. There are thousands of migrants, sub-Saharan Africans, all waiting, desperate to cross into Melilla, into Spain, into Europe. Below the mountain, you can see the border fence. It stretches for 11.5 kilometres, and it separates the Spanish territory of Melilla, Europe, where we are now, from just over there, Morocco, Africa. Now, the border itself is comprised of 3 fences. The one on the furthest side is 8 metres high. And the police say that recently migrants have been using the first fence, the movement of it, to almost catapult themselves onto the fence nearest to Spain on this side. The police say they come down to points on the border in their hundreds, and they can cross this border fence in less than a minute. And the authorities here in Melilla say that the number of migrants that crossed in the first 3 months of this year is roughly the same as the number that crossed in the whole of last year. This is the main crossing point from Morocco into Melilla, Spain. The Spanish police are carrying out rigorous checks on the vehicles here because sometimes migrants can be hidden inside the chassis of a vehicle. But you can see the huge flow of people across this border. As many as 40,000 people can make the crossing from Morocco into Melilla in one single day. And that's equivalent to half the total population of Melilla. The hundreds of migrants who have recently crossed into Melilla come to this temporary immigration centre, which is currently running at 4 times its capacity. There's normally enough space here for nearly 500 people. But you can see these temporary green tents because there are nearly 2,000 people currently here. Spain wants more help from the European Union in controlling what is one of Europe's most southern borders. It wants help tackling the mafias that traffic men to places like Melilla. And it wants more help educating men like these, because it says that although most of them will end up on the Spanish mainland, the majority will be eventually returned to the countries where they're from.
Thank you for that report, Tom Burridge. Friends, in South Africa, midday today, there's been a terrible accident. Almost 300 people remain unaccounted for after a ferry carrying 459 people capsized and sank off South Korea. This aerial footage shows passengers being rescued as the ship went down. I've got another video with a full report on it. We'll show you in just a moment. I'm just going to roll just a little bit more of this aerial footage we have of this incident, this accident off South Korea. This showing a major rescue operation that's underway after the ferry carrying, my updated report shows more than 470 people as that ferry sank off the coast of South Korea. Officials say that at least 4 people have died and hundreds are still accounted for. Most of the passengers were school children, dear friends. And that was amateur footage that we were just showing you that emerged, which apparently shows passengers on board waiting to be rescued. This next footage is also part of that amateur footage. Just a warning, first of all, though, friends, some may find Lucy Williamson's report distressing, we're supposed to tell you.
12 miles off the South Korean coast, the first glimpse of this disaster. A ferry full of school children slowly sinking in the sea. By the time rescue boats arrived, several floors were already underwater. One by one they climbed out of cabin windows. Each rescue a small victory against the rising sea. Down below, others waited in the water for rescue. They jumped into the sea to survive. They were the lucky ones. The speed and scale of this disaster was no match for rescuers. With hundreds of passengers still trapped inside, the ship began to sink. An hour later, only this remained. Dry land brought warmth and comfort for survivors and the first stories of what had happened. Passengers had felt a thud and heard loud bangs, and then one student said his classmates had done exactly as they were told.
The announcement told us we should stay still, but the ship was already sinking, and there were a lot of students who didn't get out of the ship.
This video, apparently filmed by a survivor, seems to show the passengers in life jackets waiting patiently on board. For those now reuniting with their families, the horror of what might have been is already fading. For others, it's the hope that's ebbing away. One student sent a text message to his mother as the ferry sank. "Mum," it said, "this might be my last chance to tell you I love you." His mother replied, but heard nothing more. Tonight, this list of survivors is what divides families. Hundreds of parents have been scanning these boards, searching for their children's names. Most of them aren't here. Here in the town's gymnasium tonight, the stillness of those still waiting masks a deep anger. Families here say they want more information and fewer mistakes.
Here no one's organising the information that is being given to us, and not knowing what's happening is increasing the pain of the victims' families.
The Coast Guard says this was a routine crossing in calm seas with good visibility. The cause of this crisis still a mystery. Meanwhile, in the darkness tonight, divers have been searching the corridors of the sunken ship for South Korea's missing children. Until they find them, few here in the town will sleep. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jindo, South Korea.
Sad story on that one. Well, friends, we're watching for things that relate to, as we mentioned a moment ago, let's put our chart back up on the screen. We're watching for things that relate to Europe coming together in such a way that it will trigger the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, into being. One of those things, the fourth seal, the pale horse of pestilence and seismic activity of commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, and just trouble, terake, trouble. But one of those things Jesus Christ described was pestilence or loimus, disease epidemics. And now in Europe, the European Parliament is to vote on a bill to draw up a blacklist of invasive alien species such as killer shrimp. There will be a ban on the possession, transport, and selling of species deemed to be of concern, and it's hoped that the move will help fight the spread of this pest. Claire Marshall reports.
Let's see what we can find.
Meet the alien hunters.
They're on the trail of species that do not belong in these waters. What they're looking for come from the Caspian Sea.
Oh, there's a killer shrimp.
Now they're here in Cambridgeshire.
There's a pair of killer shrimp on the end of my thumb and a zebra mussel just here.
This was the spot where killer shrimp and zebra mussels were first found in the UK just 4 years ago. They're spreading. What's so bad about invasive species?
So invasive species like these can have a huge impact on our native species. So they can outcompete them for food and for resources. They can also introduce diseases which our native species aren't resistant to, so wiping them out completely.
So a huge problem?
A huge problem.
There are others that are unwelcome. The grey squirrel ousting our native red. Japanese knotweed that costs millions to remove. The harlequin ladybird that has a nasty bite. They could now well be put on an EU hit list.
If you look at it, people are travelling more. International trade means that there's all kinds of opportunities which there previously weren't for non-native species to actually come into the UK, and we need to have a regime that's absolutely fit for purpose to deal with this before it gets out of hand.
But some gardeners are worried. The EU banned list hasn't been made public yet, and there is no limit to what species might be on it.
There is a rhododendron that's highly invasive. It's called Rhododendron ponticum, and it is, as well as being invasive and therefore a candidate for any list of prohibited plants, it's also in the parentage of lots of garden plants. In fact, we reckon it's in the parentage of as many as 300 garden plants. So if the legislation said Rhododendron ponticum and its hybrids is prohibited, that would affect 300 useful garden plants.
But where the killer shrimp are concerned, fishermen are starting to take action, trying to make sure the creatures can't hide and contaminate another waterway.
Okay, so potential pestilence problem there out of that area of Europe. Well, friends, we keep an eye on things related to the world's probably the biggest economic supplier, lender to a nation that continues to just raise its debt ceiling, almost as if there needs to be no limit. And things are slowing down in a certain way over in China. The world's second biggest economy continues to slow. China grew 7.4% in the first 3 months of this year, slightly better than expected, but below the government's target. The slowdown is part of government policy to generate wealth in a more sustainable way. The changes have hit China's bloated steel industry hardest. First, friends, we'll have this report from Martin Patience, and then we'll have another report out of China that will develop this story a little further. Martin Patience reports from the steel mills of Tongsheng in a China province.
It's the industry that's fired China's searing growth. Steel has transformed its cities and laid the foundations of the world's second largest economy. But now the industry is a symbol of China's economic weakness. Nowhere is that clearer than in Hebei province. It produces more steel in a year than the US. But oversupply, as well as concerns about pollution, mean unprofitable steel mills are being forced to close. We visited one of the dozens of plants that have stopped production. It's incredibly eerie here, but when we talk about economic restructuring in China, this is what it looks like. It means that the old industries such as steel will be left to rust whilst investment goes elsewhere. But it's a very painful process, as the workers at this plant have already found out. It means that tens of thousands of people will lose their jobs. Outside the gates, labourers can wait for a whole day and get no work. This man says a couple of years ago he can make $700 a month. Now he's lucky if he makes half that. If the steel mills don't produce, we don't get hired, he says. There are hundreds of people like me. China's leaders say major economic reforms are required to create new, better-paying jobs. But many in the country's industrial heartlands fear they'll be thrown on the scrap heap. Martin Patience, BBC News, Hebei Province.
Thank you, Martians. You know, friends, if China gets in trouble financially, some of their lending to the United States may stop. Now, if while China's in trouble and if the United States is unable to make payments on its debt to China, going to have a lot of people in China upset with the people of the United States. And in today's news, another story related to China. There are concerns about China's economy prompting fears of another global shock. Perhaps this story says even greater than the 2008 crisis. Are you listening? China's exceptional growth has been fueled by massive debt and government subsidies. Business editor Robert Preston reports from China.
China, but perhaps not as you'd recognise it. The first ever punk band in the city of Wuhan, complete with bagpipes. This is a country undergoing massive change, and that transformation accelerated in 2008 when China's government initiated the mother of all lending and investment booms to offset the economic shock which we in the West caused with our banking crisis.
I had no doubt that their strategy would be the kind of stimulus program they did. I did not imagine one on the scale and scope they pursued.
A £400 billion stimulus drove a building programme on a scale we haven't seen since Egypt's pharaohs. A new skyscraper every 5 days. More than 30 new airports. Metro systems underway in 25 cities. Over 6,000 miles of high-speed railway track and the 3 longest bridges in the world. It was an investment splurge financed with trillions of pounds of debt.
Give me an idea of the scale of the lending that we've seen since 2008.
It's off the charts, really. Most people are aware we've had a credit boom in China, but they don't know the scale. At the beginning of all of this in 2008, the Chinese banking sector was roughly $10 trillion US in size. Right now, it's on the order of 24 to 25 trillion US dollars. That incremental increase of 14 to 15 trillion US dollars is equivalent to the size of the entire US commercial banking sector, which took more than a century to build.
The Chinese government knows debt-fueled investment has to come to an end, and that could mean a sharp economic slowdown.
7-8% is not realistic.
No, it's not. I think China could do very well if the quality of the growth is transformed to higher value add. You're really looking at 4% is fine.
Or it could mean a fully fledged crash.
People who are more positive on China think that they'll find a way to grow out of this problem. Mathematically, there is no way to grow out of this problem when credit is twice the size of the economy and growing twice as fast.
Punk rocker Wu Wei isn't optimistic.
Are you positive about the huge changes there have been here in Wuhan in recent years? It's good, the development?
I don't think so. It's good for government, for the officers, and for some rich men. Some people get power, so that's not good for Chinese, normal Chinese. The poor still poor, rich get more rich.
China has broken so many economic rules over 30 years of unprecedented growth. Perhaps the lending boom won't be calamitous?
Normally, the rules of gravity apply. What goes up must eventually come down.
And friends, that's it for this Wednesday night report of Nightcast. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again Thursday night during these days of Dub, D-U-B 2014. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.